I, a 29-year-old female, recently got a call from my mother, who I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years. She said she needed my help because my sister and her husband had just been through a tragedy. For context, the man who is now my sister's husband was actually supposed to be my husband. Once upon a time, my sister. 27, female, I'll call her Melissa. Hooked up with my fiancé, Lucas, 29, male. On the day of my engagement, Lucas and I had been together since college, and he proposed to me after almost 5 years of being together. He'd thrown a party for us to surprise me on the night of our engagement, and I still remember feeling like I was on top of the world until around 1 p.m. when I decided to go out into the backyard for a better reception and caught my sister all over Lucas. There they were, making out so passionately that for the first couple of seconds they didn't even notice me standing there with my mouth wide open. I couldn't believe that he was doing this to me after almost 5 years of togetherness, and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally did take note of me, they broke apart instantly, but it was too late. I made a run for it, got into my car, and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel that I could find. I was hyperventilating because I was so shocked at what I had witnessed. I was somehow trying to process it and willing it to be untrue. But then I received the text from Melissa saying that she was sorry, but she was in love with Lucas, and apparently this had been going on for a really long time. Now I was in the hotel room when I received that text, and I broke down like never before. After Melissa, Lucas texted me pretty much the same thing. He said that he had only proposed because he felt that if he committed to me, then he would be able to push Melissa out of his head. Obviously, that hadn't worked, and it made him want Melissa even more. He told me that it wasn't about me, but this was about them, and they just knew that they were meant to be. I was just a placeholder and the way for Lucas to finally meet Melissa. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days and tried to put my act together because I was still feeling crazy and trying to force myself to believe that this was just a cruel prank that life was playing on me. After almost 4 days, I finally went back home because I did need to collect my stuff and rejoin work if I didn't want to get fired. When I showed up at home, I realized that my family had been living with Lucas under the same roof, waiting for me to come back. It would almost be touching had it not been for the circumstances under which I left. Everybody had been trying to text me and get me to respond relentlessly after I disappeared, but I hadn't replied to a single one of those texts. So needless to say, there was a lot of chaos when I finally came back, and everybody made it a point to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Melissa had the audacity to come to me and give me a giant hug with tears in her eyes when she saw me. I was too disorientated to even react to that and just stood there like a silent statue while everyone clamored around me. Then finally, once everybody had calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was back only to take my things and move out for good. Lucas had just been standing there without a word until that point. But when I said that I was going to move out, he announced that there was no need for me to leave because he'd already packed his stuff and was going to move in with Melissa since now everything was out in the open anyway. My family, my parents, my aunt, my dad's youngest sister, who has lived in the same house ever since her husband passed away, actually had wide smiles on their faces, even though there was nothing to smile about, at least not according to me. Melissa was standing beside Lucas in an awkward hug and looked at me very sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to ask my family what the heck they were even smiling about because as far as I was concerned, Melissa had just broken up my engagement and stolen my boyfriend of almost 5 years. There was really nothing very funny or sweet about this. My mother chose to speak up at that point and told me that they couldn't go back in time and change the past, but they could accept the future, and they knew that the future had Melissa and Lucas together in it. Granted, it was a relationship that had formed out of cheating, and they did feel sorry about it, but they also wanted me to understand and accept that this was for the best. Melissa said that she was very sorry for taking my boyfriend away from me, but she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished that she could have told me earlier and I didn't have to find out this way, but apparently they were madly in love and wanted to spend their lives with each other. Then the two of them kissed right in front of me, and my mother had the audacity to even wipe a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't supposed to be sentimental or emotional, and that what they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family seemed to get annoyed with my behavior and told me that I was being too bratty about the situation. Instead of being happy for my sister, I was making this all about myself, and they didn't approve of my behavior. I was stunned by their attitude about this and told them all to get the heck out of my house that very moment. I couldn't for the life of me understand how they were defending what Melissa and Lucas had done while making me out to be the bad guy and acting as though I was overreacting. My father intervened and told me not to act like a child because these things happen, and I should take it in my stride. He wanted me to celebrate that my sister had finally found her soulmate instead of being jealous of her. They were literally all acting insane, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I just said screw it, went into my room, packed some of my things, and left yet again without even speaking to them or waiting to hear them out, even as they called out my name and told me not to go. I really didn't have anything left to say to them because it was very clear to me that they cared more about Melissa and her happiness than about me or even about what was right and wrong. They were so caught up in trying to justify what Melissa had done that they completely forgot that I was also a human being with real feelings as well. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded to them because I didn't think that I owed it to them. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding. I declined the wedding invitation, obviously, and all the common friends that Lucas and I had also declined the invitation in solidarity with me. Even a couple of relatives who knew the truth refused to interact with my family after they learned how they had treated me in the aftermath of the party. It's been 5 years, and I pretty much cut them out of my life entirely. They occasionally tried to weasel their way back into my life by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignored them. I never even blocked any of them, even though I did remove them from my following and friends list. But since I have a public account, they could see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see, and I wanted them to know that I was leading a fabulous life and keep burning with jealousy. It was petty, but it was the least I could do after how they screwed me over. Up until recently, I barely even had a clue of what they'd been up to in the last couple of years. My mother called me about 4 days ago from a number that I didn't have saved. When I answered the call and realized that it was my mom on the other end, I immediately tried to hang up. But she begged me desperately for one chance to talk to me because apparently they were in dire need of help. I agreed to talk to her for just a couple of minutes, but only because she sounded so upset and my humanity didn't allow me to turn my back on her at that moment. She told me that Melissa and Lucas had started a business of their own a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were all backing out because they were failing to make any profit at all. So they borrowed more money, but even that didn't help their business, and now they were neck deep in debt, and the loan sharks were all after them. They were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. My mother knew that I lived a luxurious lifestyle and could afford to help them out, so she had turned to me as a last resort and was begging me to help them out by loaning them some money so they could pay off their debts. And it was no small amount either that she was asking me for. It was almost $75,000 that she wanted me to give her so she could help Melissa and Lucas out. I asked her why Melissa wasn't calling me if she needed help and why she was making my mother speak to me on her behalf. My mother told me that Melissa and Lucas didn't even know that she was coming to me for help, as they had given her strict instructions not to approach me. Melissa didn't want me to know any of this and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anybody else who would have that kind of money and would give it to them at the drop of a hat. A couple of months had already passed, and Melissa and Lucas were struggling to even put food on the table. My parents were helping them all they could, and even Lucas's family were trying to give them all that they possibly could. But it was just not enough, and even they had to be able to support themselves in the future. So it was impossible for them to just give away all the money that they'd saved over the years, especially because most of my family was retired, and so were Lucas's parents. That's why my mother, with no other option left, had called me to request help. Now I could afford to help them out, but I really didn't want to. Melissa was right for not contacting me to ask for help. They lost the right to make any demands from me the day that they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. My mother sounded very upset and told me that I was being cruel and I needed to think about my family. I told her that Melissa and Lucas hadn't thought about me when they had that affair, and neither did my family think about me while they were supporting the two of them. So right now, there was no need for me to think about them either. I'd worked hard to get to the position where I am today, and I wasn't about to just go and drop $75,000 on two people who didn't even deserve it. My mother then began to cry on the phone and told me that she had never expected me to grow up to be so selfish. She claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I said that it was just too bad, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, my mother has been sending me several texts every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister for once. She said that this was not the time for petty revenge and that the trouble that Melissa was in was very serious. So if I didn't help her now, I really would regret it in the future. She's being crazy. And I don't understand what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad guy here either. Am I the asshole for not helping my sister out financially after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update 1. So I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because A, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous of me, and B, because I thought that cutting them off entirely could be something that I would regret in case something bad were to happen to them. But I don't really care now. I should have removed them 5 years ago. I don't understand why I even kept them around so long. That is what was petty of me. Refusing to help my sister out now isn't petty. It's just the logical thing to do. They'd already wasted tons and tons of money, and I'm sure that even if I give them the money right now, they won't be able to repay it. $75,000 is a pretty big amount, so I might be well off. But that doesn't mean I can just drop that sort of money and not expect it back. If this was a close friend of mine who I was helping, I still would expect that money back. And here, these are neither people who are close to me nor my loved ones, nor can I expect them to pay me back. So there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I told a couple of my friends about this too to get their opinion on it, and they agreed that I'd done the right thing by refusing to give them the money. Not even out of a feeling of revenge, but mostly because it was completely impractical and stupid to even expect me to help them when they were the ones who had screwed me over in the past. But anyway, my mother is blocked now, and she can't contact me to guilt-trip me anymore. So I have nothing to worry about. About update 2. Hey guys, something really big happened today. I was at work when I received a call from my neighbor saying that there was a couple outside my house screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor told me they seemed pretty crazy and had been screaming at the door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her for a description of them, but in my heart, I already knew who it was. She confirmed it was Melissa and Lucas. I thanked her and immediately started driving back home because I couldn't risk them getting into my house at any cost. Luckily, I got there in about 15 minutes and caught them trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I confronted them and tried to call the police immediately, but Lucas knocked the phone out of my hand. Melissa said they were there just to talk and didn't want anything from me, at least not at the moment. I insisted they make it quick and that we discuss whatever they had to say in the yard since I didn't want to invite them inside. Melissa started talking and told me that my mother had informed her about the phone call and how I'd ignored subsequent texts and blocked them all. She said my behavior was unfair and that it had been 5 years, so I should be over it by now. She felt insulted because of how I'd refused to help them. Melissa mentioned she'd arranged the money for now, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. Since they had sold their house and all their jewelry to get the money this time, she couldn't do that again. She wanted to know if she could rely on me for help when she needed it. I told her that no, she couldn't, and she must not count on me at all under any circumstances because I hate her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I also told her that it was taking me a lot of restraint to not hit her at the moment, so it would be in their best interest to just leave. Lucas had the audacity to say that they weren't going anywhere until I signed a document that would confirm that I would give the money in the future whenever they needed it. I mean, it wouldn't even be valid if I was forced to it under pressure. I'm pretty sure there are laws against it, and also they must be insane if they actually thought that they could manipulate me into signing something like that. I told both of them to get the hell out, and Melissa pushed me, saying that I had to help them because apparently I owed this to them since they were family, and I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was shocked that she'd actually pushed me, and I was about to slap her, but I controlled the urge to do that because things would only get worse if I got violent. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Lucas knocked it out of my hand, and made a run for it. I climbed into my car as quickly as I could and then drove off without even bothering to check my rearview mirror. I hadn't bothered to shut off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running, and it didn't take me much time to get a head start on them. Obviously, they were not stupid enough to chase after me on foot, so they just waited there at my house, which was pretty unfortunate. As soon as I was a safe distance away from them, I decided to call the police and tell them what was going on, and then I drove back to my house just in the nick of time before the police had already arrived. Within 20 minutes, I filled them in on everything and they arrested and took Melissa and Lucas away. I knew that the charges weren't that serious and they would get off pretty easily, but it was still worth it because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to waste any more of my time with them. It's been a couple of hours since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange because I'd figured out that by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from some other numbers, but they haven't. So I'm guessing that they're either just over everything and aren't going to try and get under my skin again, or they're just waiting it out and biding their time so they can contact me later when things are a little less tense. Update 3. Hi. So the last update was about a week ago, and I'd honestly started to believe that my family was actually not going to bother me again because I had called the cops on Melissa and Lucas. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from disturbing me yet again. And this time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking me if they could speak to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed a lot less cocky and arrogant compared to Melissa and Lucas. So I let them in. My mother started crying pretty much as soon as she entered the house and told me how sorry she was that she'd ever taken Melissa's side over mine. My father told me that after they learned of Melissa and Lucas being arrested because of their behavior, and also that they had physically pushed me, they couldn't bring themselves to look at them the same way and had decided that they were going to cut them off. My mother continued to cry throughout the time that she was here, while my father explained that they were apologetic for siding with Melissa in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. While I said that I did appreciate them for finally coming to their senses, but right now, it was too little and too late for things to get better. I was used to living my life on my own terms now, and I didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. So as much as I appreciated their visit and apology to me, I really couldn't promise them that I would work on this relationship because I just didn't feel that there was any point in trying to salvage an already ruined relationship, even if it is with my parents. They protested a little at that point and said that we could fix this if we wanted to. But that was exactly where the problem was. I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself. That's all. And I told them. I respected their efforts, but I was done here. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually they left and asked me if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I have unblocked my parents, which feels weird, but yeah, I guess that's it.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident, especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it." Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. "Do you two know each other?" "Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, 'I'm moving to the sales department soon.' If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. "It's still working hours." Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.